Okay. Okay, so if we just want to go say who's here. So Lindsay's here.
Emily's here.
April's here.
Sandra's here.
Stephanie's here.
I have really bad feedback on my end. Can you guys hear that too? I hope it's not like that the whole time.
Okay. Who's the data manager today?
That's me.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so I can do that.
Okay, so it looks like there's only one question for this week. So hopefully, I mean, she likes it to be long, but I don't know how long this is going to actually be. So it says, what lessons have you learned to make you more skillful in combating your chosen topic or threat? So I just kind of, I don't know, I had a couple of thoughts that I thought were interesting from the TED Talk. And one of the things that I really like that he talked about is how like authority doesn't really mean anything when it comes to research. Like it does, but just because someone of authority says something, it doesn't mean that it's true. And he talked about how people can manipulate research and make it seem better than it really is. And so when you are doing your research, you have to consider that and look at it from different angles and different perspectives, because like he had said that the more experienced companies, they tend to have better statistic than independent companies, and it's because they can control it. They can twist it to make it look the way that they want it to look. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, I don't know, when I read research from people that I have like heard of, or they seem like they have good credits, like it sometimes like doesn't mean anything. So you have to research not only like your topic, but the people that have like given you your research. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And also, let's see, I have also found that, I mean, research obviously takes time, and I have found that it's easier if you can like narrow down your topic, because so for mine's talking about like fatherhood, and like when I just typed in fatherhood, like so much came up, and it's kind of overwhelming, I feel like sometimes, because there's so much information, and especially when you're limited to only like so much, that you just really have to like focus on one aspect of your topic. And so those were my thoughts for that question.
I really like what you said about the authority. I like put the same thing down for mine. I really like the example in the TED Talk. It just talked about some lady who, claimed she was a doctor, and then she, said this study, and he totally just bashed the study because it wasn't true and it wasn't correct. And so I think that like happens a lot in our society. Like I just think of like Bill Nye the Science Guy is kind of a silly example, but he's not even a scientist, but we put so much trust in like everything that he says, and we just believe it. But like when in reality, like with research, we have to like do the work for ourselves, because sometimes like it can be false, and then we believe these things that people tell us when really it's just like their opinions and not facts. So from that, I was thinking about like in research, I know in past research essays that I've written, it's so easy to like throw your opinion in there, but like with all the examples that we've learned about this week, I've realized that I can't do that, or sometimes I like to over exaggerate it, and then it sounds like completely different than what the actual study is. And so I just think like with research, we need to make it as true and as honest as we can without kind of putting our bias in it and other people's bias in it, because then it just kind of skews the results. But yeah, and then I really liked from the TED Talk, he said, one of the quotes that I wrote down was that we should not make decisions with the absence of information. So I just really like that, because sometimes I think we jump to conclusions instead of like backing up what we say with information and facts and truth. And so, yeah, that's what I learned from this week's lesson and kind of how I took it and how I'm going to write my paper this week.
Yeah, something that I really liked from the TED Talk is how he talked about like the placebo effect and how a lot of clinical studies, they kind of talk about like, this is our drug and this is the effects that it had. And he kind of said, well, of course your drug had this effect because you're comparing it to nothing, basically. So, and I had never like really thought about that before because I mean, I've seen research on like new drugs and things like that. And when you get that information initially, you're like, wow, that's really great because this new medicine is having this effect and it's helping people. But we don't like, they don't compare it to other medicines and how, like, is it really better than what we've already had? Or is it just really like the same thing? Another thing is that we don't realize the kind of control that the people making the studies have because they can compare it to other drugs, but they can be giving like higher doses that cause side effects or lower doses that don't really do much and people aren't being really treated correctly, just so that they can skew the information in their favor. So I thought that was really interesting and how it's really hard sometimes to find what good research is because you never really know what's like behind the study and behind what people like, what's the real purpose or the agenda of what people are saying. Another thing going off of like the agenda that just like watching all of the videos and looking back at all of the things that we've read so far about advocacy and like the facts and things that people bring, when you're listening to what people are saying, you really have to think about the agenda that they have. Like, what's the point that they're trying to get across? Because when they have an agenda, they're going to do everything they can and bring forth all of the study and all of the work that proves or supports their agenda. And I never really thought about that in advocacy, that as an advocate, in order to be an effective advocate and to be a fair advocate, you actually have to show both sides. Show what supports you, like you need to be giving both sides, and that actually makes you more credible. So I thought that was really cool. And also kind of in a gospel perspective, I think it's really cool that literally everything in our society now has an agenda, all advertisement, different organizations and things like that. But Heavenly Father, with the gospel, we know that there's no agenda, that it's simply because he loves us and he wants us to be happy. And I've also found, because I was thinking like about, I think in the TED Talk he mentioned like you can't just share your beliefs and expect people to like that's what's true and that's what fact is. But when I was thinking about how the gospel would play into fact, I was thinking about how we support families, or like the word of wisdom. Like, I know that that's true. I know that that's good for my body because there's all of these studies showing that alcohol is bad for your body. Or families are important because we know that there's studies out there about psychological damages that go into children that don't have both parents, or people that are abused, or how the economy drops when they're single mothers or having kids out of wedlock. Like, everything in the gospel, all the commandments that we're given is still supported by a lot of the research and the fact. We just have to find them and be able to explain them to people without bringing our religion into it, but they still support the views that we have. So I think that's really cool. And that's what I learned this week.
Okay. So what I kind of took was similar to what you guys were talking about with their agenda, is you have to look at who sponsored them, who is funding the the program, who's funding the treatment. So, because if somebody's funding them, like, let's say like $30,000, they're going to want to skew it in that company's direction to keep the funding going. So we'll have to be careful of that when we do the research. Also, what I was thinking of while what I was reading is that it's easier to do research a little bit at a time. Do like, I'm going to research this part of the topic today, and then make all your notes and stuff, and then do the different part of the research the next day. That way you're not boggled down like, so much research. Like, I don't know what to think. You don't know what to think when you do it all at once. So doing it separately, a little bit at a time, will make it easier to process and to think through the research. At least that's what I took out of it.
Yeah, seems like we all picked up on the, who says so kind of thing, on who's in charge of the research and why are they pushing this at us. And one of the things that from the on the Word document that she provided for us, there's a quote that said that a work that contains, well, basically, if it only contains sources from online, then it's likely to give the reader the impression that the writer wasn't very enthusiastic about their investigation. And so, I'm going to try and make sure that I do a good job of finding things that come from not just online sources, but print magazines or books or journals or that kind of thing, so that it's so I look enthusiastic in my research or something. And then there was a big long table at the very end of methodological potholes, and some of the ones I wrote down that I want to avoid were the criticizing a person rather than the argument. And not that I would be doing that necessarily in my research, but sometimes we look at who wrote an article and just sort of brush it off right away. Like, I think if I were to see something by like Donald Trump, I might just discount it altogether, but I should read it first and then form my opinion, that kind of thing. And then the other one was overgeneralization, and my topic is I don't know how to narrow it down, but it's the lack of education for girls throughout the world. And so, that's an easy thing to overgeneralize, because we're talking about half of this, like girls throughout the whole world. So I need to come up with a way to, focus it and make it more narrow, kind of like Stephanie was saying, so that I can not be so overwhelmed with everything out there. And then just the last thing that I came away with was, just because a concept is frequently repeated does not mean it should be accepted without question. And that's so easy to do. Just because 5 articles or something have said it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the truth or the best thing, and then I can still do additional research to see if there's opposing viewpoints, because I need to put opposing viewpoints in my research as well. So.
Another thing that I'll share really quick that I found, I can't even remember where in the reading it was, but it was talking about how, like, because of past research, we have learned so much about our world and how innovative it is. And so I thought it was kind of interesting, because I hadn't really thought about how the research that we do now, we build off of other research. And so research is always something that we're going to have to do, and it's always going to be important for us to continue to learn things about our world and different topics. And I hadn't really thought about that, how things that we've learned in the past we're going to learn again, and things that we learn today we're going to use to learn about more in the future. And so I thought that was kind of interesting too. Do you guys have anything else you want to add?
So I'll just add something. So I really like what April said. I think research is constantly changing. And so 5 articles might have something that says, the same thing, but we shouldn't necessarily believe it. And that's why I think it's so important that we do our own research so that we can look at the opposing view and look at their view and look at maybe somebody else's view or do research on our own so that we're able to form more of our opinions rather than just relying on somebody else's work. So I think it's like important to know and realize that, an article that was written 10 years ago, like research now might be completely different. So to keep that in mind.
Yeah, a lot of my past classes when we've had to do research papers, they've usually said it can't be past 5 years. If the research is 5 years old, it's outdated. Don't use it. So
What did you guys think about the videos that we had to watch this week? One that really stood out to me was like the interview that it was like the girl in the red dress and the guy in the suit. And I feel like I don't know, just when people are like presenting research and findings, like I feel that when they're contradictory to what other people believe, it's really hard to stay focused on like the research and the findings, because I feel like the lady was kind of attacking him like, so you believe this, so what about this? Like, she wasn't focusing on what he had presented, she was just focusing on his beliefs and his view. So I think that that's something to definitely take under consideration when thinking about research. Like, you need to really focus on the facts, not so much like what view they have or whatever. Like, you need to kind of set that aside and just focus on what facts are presented and what research is brought forward.
I really liked the video. I think it was at the very bottom, the optional one, where it was the lady who used to be on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women. I don't know if any of you watched that one, but she gave like a plan for a different kind of feminism. But I thought, here we are discussing, being able to look at new research and apply it, and focusing on facts. And she was a great example of somebody that had believed a certain way, had seen new research, different facts, and was willing and able to change her mind. And I think that, like the interview you're talking about, Cassandra, she was not willing to listen to anything he said. She had her ideas and she didn't care the facts that he was presenting. She was just going on her feelings and emotions. And so I really liked that last video, just because it shows, with new research, how it can like completely change a person's point of view.
I think that's one of the interesting things about when I do research. Like, there's been multiple times that like I've picked a stance on a topic and then I go and research the other side of it, and I'll change my view like completely, because I think I know a lot about it, but like when you really like get into research, it's kind of crazy how much stuff there is, and it can like, I don't know, it's changed my mind a couple of times. And so I just think it's really important to go in open-minded and not be like, nope, I believe this and that's it. There's no like, I'm not budging, because I don't know, there's always good points on, I think, both sides of the topic.
One thing that stood out to me in the Word document that we had to read is he mentions that when it comes to research, you also need to allow people to formulate their own ideas, which is something that stood out to me in the video that talked about like AIDS in Africa, and how the US is really pushing for them to change their laws to allow homosexuality and they're basically, at least according to the video, because I don't know everything that's going on with that. Unfortunately, I'm not as politically informed as I should be, I guess. But it looks like that the US is withholding aid money from Africa unless they change their laws. So I think that we need to be really careful too, that once we present research, once we have it out there, we can't force that opinion and that belief onto other people. Like, they need to be able to make up their own mind. And that's something that we learn in the gospel too. Like, we have our agency. We're supposed to search for our own testimony and make up our own mind and make our own decisions about what we learn about truth. So I think that's a really key thing that we need to learn, is that we can't just force our laws, our opinions, our facts on other people. They need to find that out for themselves.
Does anybody else have anything they want to share, or is that it? Okay, who wants to record next week?
I think we've all had a turn, right? So I'll do the next one. We can just rotate through again.
Okay, sounds good. And then who wants to be the reporter? I don't think I've done that yet, so I could actually do that.
Okay.
And then what time works for everyone next week? Do we have a preference?
Next week I could do like 6 again or later. Up to you guys.
Later is better for me.
Okay.
If we could go back to that.
Yeah,
Was
later.
it 8 Mountain?
8 works for me.
That sounds
Think
good.
good.
Yeah,
That's good.
8 will work for me.
All right. Thank you.
I can give my summarization thing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'm just gonna like go down the list of what I got from each one of you. So we kind of started off by talking about authority. Just because someone of authority says something does not necessarily mean it's true. We kind of need to do the research of ourselves for ourselves. And it's better when you can narrow down your topic instead of just having a broad one, because it makes it easier to do research when you have more of a narrow topic. It's important to make research honest and leaving your opinions out of it. We need to watch the biases in our research so that we know what the research says isn't true. We need to make sure there's an agenda to the research to show both sides. I really like how Cassandra said that, and like compared this to an advocator. So make sure that you know both sides so that you're more credible. We can be that way when we're an advocator and in our papers. Going back to the agenda, I really liked what Stephanie said about like who's funding the research, because that can kind of show like if it's skewed or not and which way it's skewed. It's easier to do the research a little bit at times, so like a little bit at a time so that it comes together easier. I know when I space out research that I do, it comes together a lot better than when I try to cram it all into one setting. Finding a source from a different place and not just online. I really liked that, what April said, because then I think you can have a bunch of different credible sources that are not only online, but in journals or magazine articles or things like that, and it brings the research more together. And then lastly, not overgeneralizing, but looking into something before, making your opinions about it. And and don't believing everything you read, but to do that research and add in opposing views so that we can have a good paper that is not biased towards one view but shows all the views and shows the facts. So that's what I got in this week's meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we'll see you guys next week. Good luck with your papers.
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.